Good. All right. Well, just in case that didn't make the minutes, since we're waiting on John Ballard,
Doubles down.
there's probably no sense in continuing to wait any longer. Somebody please tell him I said that.
Done.
Folks, appreciate you all being here. We will kick this off and get rolling. We may have one or two come in and out online. That'll be good. But appreciate you all being here. Hard to believe this is the fourth and final meeting of this group. But here we are, and I think we've done some good work, and we'll be wrapping up our portion of this journey. And I do want us to think of this as a journey, because I think there's work that has been done before we convened. There is work that we have hopefully initiated as a result of our convening, and there will be more to do once this group dissolves and the other groups are brought in. But welcome to our final meeting. As just a recap and reminder, this is a group that was presented as an opportunity to us from the National Association of School Boards of Education as a transformation state network. But really and truly, what we were looking at is being a part of an effort to create more engagement in our high schools for all students. And I think we approached that work from three lenses. One being how we share innovative best practice amongst our schools and school districts, how we remove barriers that may exist from this innovation for them, and are there policy recommendations that we would see necessary to accomplish one of those two objectives. But I think we have been able to share some from our own experiences and journeys, what we've seen. We've been able to see some high-performing schools and speak to some students along this journey. So I'm very proud of what we've done to kind of cluster themes and gather these areas that we identify as opportunities for improvement. As we are coming today, I think what we're really trying to do is finalize our work and kind of galvanize some of these recommendations. And I'm not going to belabor the history of what we've done so we can get into the future of what we're wanting to do. But I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Young if she is amenable to give us some discussion on where we are and where we're going.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Pate. Welcome, especially to those of you online. Dr. Nick Brake is in today for Dr. Murphy from Western Kentucky. Thank you. Lakeisha, we always appreciate having you here. Thanks for stepping in again for the chamber. And Dr. Bacon in for Bullitt County. So glad to see you there too, and welcome everybody in person. John, Justin already started out by making fun of you for being late.
That was an acknowledgement. I acknowledge John Ballard.
Want to make an entrance.
Well, you did it, and so be sure you watch the video because he doubled down on it just to give you a hard time. So it's the kind of day we're going to have, I'm just telling you. So glad you guys are here. Thank you. So we do want to just use your time as purposefully as possible since this is our last convening of this great think tank and work group. So those of you who are able to join us in person or virtually on April 8th, we worked through an activity where we did some affinity mapping of the work that's going on. So in your email with the agenda, you have this document. Those of you here with us in person, you have a hard-colored copy of it front and back. And so the activity we have planned today is to do what our original charge was, and that is to take each of these themes that we identified one by one, and we're going to consider those as a work group, and we've kind of distilled them down into the most pressing issues. In that process, I also want to call your attention, Chris and I were just talking about this. You have this document in the attachment. It's from XQ. The future is high school, and they've done a Kentucky-specific policy scan around their Big 10 recommendations for high school transformation. Those of you who don't know XQ, it is the group that started out with the XQ high school reimagination event and have been working with innovative high schools all across the country. And so they have moved into the policy arena, thinking about what policy levers need to be pulled around high school transformation. So we'll refer to that document in this process some as well. But those of you online, if you would go ahead and open up the affinity handout, I think is what it's called, the document. And then everybody else, we're not going to break up into groups on this one because I think it's going to be really important, since it's our last meeting, for us all to hear all of the conversation. So folks online, please do not be timid. Not that any of the three of you would be. Just unmute and jump right in. If I don't see you, I can't see anything like raised hands or anything like that. So just feel free to engage in that conversation. Jesse's thinking about the last time he was timid and can't remember, so. All right, so let me just back up a little bit to say that we started out with an activity where we gathered information from the Kentucky United We Learn Council. They had done a Lotus Blossom activity where they surfaced a lot of the things that they thought were relevant to this conversation about the current state of high schools across Kentucky. And then we did that again ourselves in the High School Transformation Network Task Force. And so we compiled those two sets of feedback and then worked through this affinity mapping around four questions. Yeah, what surprised you? 3 questions. What do you want to know more about? And what surfaced for you as a pressing issue related to high schools? So I might stop just a minute for you guys to meet Nick, and I know about his background. But Nick, if you would say good morning and tell us a little bit about your background and interest in high school transformation as well.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I had some classes that I'm teaching that started this week, so I had to be place-based here at WKU. But I have, before being a professor at WKU, I work at WKU with the superintendent program and the doc program and a few other things. I was superintendent in Owensboro. When I was in Owensboro, we started one of the New Tech Network schools there, the Owensboro Innovation Academy, which is a project-based learning, innovation-based school. Owensboro at the time was one of the districts of innovation in that iteration of the innovation world in Kentucky. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time really working with dual credit programs, did a dissertation on dual credit, was involved in advising and behind the scenes kind of stuff with all the work in Kentucky around dual credit up to the scholarship program. The community college in Owensboro has had over the years one of the largest programs in the state, and was involved with the startup of that way back in 20, 30 years ago. So have been involved in different iterations of high school reform. We actually got a Gates grant and opened an early college on the campus in Owensboro back in 2003, and had some of the first students graduate from college and high school at the same time way back then. Actually, my first year superintendent had one of those students wander into my office. This kid was living in his car when we had him at Owensboro Community College. And he had just finished medical school and was setting up shop to be a doctor in Owensboro. So the power of those kind of settings for our students is what has always motivated me to look at different opportunities for high school, because realistically, we, with our traditional high school, serve probably about a third of our kids well. And so we have to think about that engagement cliff and how we do things differently. And so when Dr. Murphy asked me to help her with this and to attend in her place, I was more than happy, because I think, Lou, you and I may have been on one of those Pritchard task force years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And there have been multiple iterations going back to Bob Sexton where we've talked about high schools. And I think we've seen changes come through each of those. And so I'm really excited about what's going to happen as a result of this, and with Dr. Fletcher's leadership, and with the all the work that's happening in the state right now. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Your background, just you have all the creds we need to have this conversation today, so really appreciate that. Please don't feel like a first-timer or a newcomer, but be an old friend in this conversation today. Was that a
Thank you so
Gates Small Schools grant in '03?
No, it was through the Middle College National Consortium,
okay.
the LaGuardia Community College model, where they actually opened we looked at it as an alternative high school on the campus there. And that's what it was. It was really looking at an alternative school for students that were not functioning well in a traditional setting, but had the capability of finishing a 2-year degree in high school.
Well, if you look at that, your dual credit background, your connections to KCTCS and to higher ed, and then add in this conversation around new tech and innovative schools programming, I think you got a lot to add to this conversation today, and just fire on all of those cylinders as we work through this. So thank you. If you would
Glenn,
take a
I'm
look.
happy to be
Oh, yeah.
involved going forward on anything that you guys decide that there's a need. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Listen, we're going to get your cell number right now, so thank you. If you guys
Robbie
would
has.
take a look at, we've kind of distilled this down to right now, 5 buckets, if you will, of issues related to the further exploration we need to do in Kentucky before we engage in yet another high school transformation initiative, because Nick and I have been around long enough that I remember in the 90s when we first got to CARA, we had a high school transformation team at work then, and then in the early 2000s, we had another high school transformation team at work across the state. So what has gone around now has come back around. But these ideas, these big ideas, and we've lumped them as pushing beyond the status quo. You guys have heard me say, John, I know you had this in E-Town, there's nothing quite like the vortex of the alma mater. People went to high school, they went to high school in that community, there's a love and affinity more often than not for the high schools in their community, and quite frankly, people think because I went to high school, I know how to do high school, and I know how I want my kid to do high school, so that status quo is deeply rooted in the high school experience. You'll see that the longest column is around equitable access and funding. In fact, you'll have to turn the paper all over, those of you who have a hard copy of it, to get to all the equitable access and funding. So we know this is going to emerge as a hot button issue for us, John, as we move forward. So we'll really need your support and input on that. Trust is a little bitty column for us here, but it was powerfully repeated across all of the groups that we talked to, the affinity groups that we talked to. Really talked a lot about how important it is. Educators particularly feel strongly about the need to rebuild trust around the high school experience in their communities. The fourth one, building a system around vibrant learning. The State Board of Education has put a really firm stake in the ground around vibrant learning experiences. We have a beautiful definition about the authentic learning and the application of knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And as you'll see in the XQ report, Kentucky is touted around our October 22 work around Portrait of a Learner. I just talked to California this past week, Linda Darling Hammond. They have just launched their California Portrait of a Learner, and they had met with us as a state board to get some ideas about how that works. So competency ed is moving forward at a really fast rate. And then lastly, Nick, this is something that Corinne was super helpful with too. There's a little tiny bucket around teacher training and certification. I ran into Dr. Brewer just briefly on the way in this morning, but we will have some more conversations with her about how we can look at the issues related to high school teacher training. For example, I don't know if it's passed yet, Dr. Fletcher, but they were looking at a multidisciplinary high school certification in science, which has always been a stranglehold. John, Nick, and I have been superintendents, and you know how crazy it gets when you're trying to find somebody with physical science versus biological science versus earth space. But you know you've got a heck of a science teacher on the hook, but their certification might not match. But they have actually taken steps to loosen up that bottleneck. Has that actually been approved?
I don't think it's been approved at this point.
Not
but
yet.
it's- It has not.
Okay, all right. So
But
that's
it
right,
has been a
Amanda's on EPSB
recommendation,
too.
and I think that we have exactly what you said through the worker.
Okay, excellent. So you can see, I think that's an important kind of point, that we got a lot of folks who are rowing in the same direction around some of these issues, and I would say that we're pointed toward innovation and thinking differently about the future of high school. So that's enough preamble for me. If you would, look at the third row under pressing issues. But again, feel free to look at surprise and want to know more about, especially the want to know more about is going to be part of our conversation. Frankly, you can look across any of the rows and columns. But let's start with pushing beyond the status quo. I think I have a slide for this one. I want to just frame how we think about this discussion so that we can gather as much information here. Oh, there, it's up there. I was looking at Nick. All right, so what we want to do is go pressing issue by pressing issue. And back to Justin framed this early on as being around promising practices, policy, and removing barriers. So we're going to try to keep those three threads in mind as we work through each of the pressing issues, with the goal of identifying, let's just put it on paper, identifying the barriers that we want to address moving forward, brainstorming some moonshot ideas. What are some innovative solutions, or under the promising practices category, what are some ideas that XQ has talked about, that LPI has talked about, you've heard about in schools that you visited, what's happening that we might begin to just capture on paper. Here's some innovative solutions to think about. New Tech would be an example of that in terms of an innovative high school program. And then lastly, what potential policy solutions and/or promising practices at the school level should we capture in terms of what we've learned as a workforce moving forward? Dr. Pate will say more about this, but even though our work group team will be finished as of today, this work is going to move forward, and Dr. Pate will be asking for this team to consider a motion to refer high school transformation to the Kentucky United We Learn Council. They're prepared to receive that recommendation. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the meeting, but let's take what we've learned so far, and this is your all's time, now that you've had a chance to read and to think together and analyze the feedback. This is your time to say, here, let's surface these barriers, innovative solutions, and policy and promising practices idea. Is that enough of a setup for the conversation? Got it? All right, great. So Glib to saying, and we've got this recorded, so I'm sure she's going to be taking a lot of notes. She's really good at synthesizing as it happens. But let's start on the pushing beyond the status quo. What any of the, you don't have to go in order. Solutions, barriers, promising practices, policy, any of those in any order. But what comes to mind for you? What have you been thinking about in that regard? I really suck at wait time.
Well, so I'll say one of the things that I always think about is, since I've been on this board, I've learned so much about what is available for schools and districts that's not being utilized by schools and districts. And I think, some of the low-hanging fruit here is just the knowledge that high schools can tailor their graduation requirements a little more directly to what students, particularly in CTE pathways, would more likely need in their careers and vocations, rather than what they would need for graduate school, prep education pathways in a four-year, environment. Yet, a lot of schools are not choosing to tailor those graduation requirements, and I'll use my discipline. I'm an old English teacher.
Yep.
English seems to be one of the biggest hurdles to overcome. We're still doing English 1, 2, 3, 4, when we could be doing English 1, 2, and then maybe 2 years of business English for a CTE student. So I think, to me, that falls in that sharing of best practice environment to try to create pods maybe of like-minded districts, like resourced districts, to work together to find ways to offer these things to these kids. So I'm really thinking a lot about the sharing of the best practice in this pushing beyond status quo environment to, A, raise awareness amongst high school principals and district leaders as to what is possible, and B, perhaps create pods of school districts to share resources who may not have enough teachers to offer English 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 sections of business English, but maybe collectively together they could. So I think, to me, that's one of the things that I would love to see the Cool Council, kind of start looking to implement a recommendation from us to create more awareness and action around the things that we currently have in place.
Excellent.
If I may, one of the examples that we saw happened at Elkhorn Crossing. If you remember, the English teacher that was catering the biomed English 4 class to their needs versus the same English teacher catering the English 4 class to the law and justice pathway. So first of all, to have a teacher that is willing to go that route to say, okay, I can cater English 4 to meet the needs of the students and what their desires are. But that's just happening in pockets. And we see that now. And so, and I think that may go back to some of our EPPs also too, with that, how do we train our teachers to be able to have that type of flexibility? So I would think, Dr. Petty, I think you're spot on. We're so tied to the how we did high school, as Dr. Young pointed out earlier, that we have to have English 1, English 2, English 3, English 4, as opposed to English 4 looking more along the lines of that personalized pathway for students. And again, this is just, when we say career, we're not just talking about welding. We're not talking about just, we also get into that habit of calling the career technical versus a law class. It's all career.
Yeah.
It's all career. But again, I think that's something that, how do we help give our teachers the freedom, and also too, making sure that they're willing to have those opportunities. They want to be there and want to do those different things.
Excellent. I think this is a good, solid start. Thank you so much, Justin, for getting us here. If you look at the XQ report over on pages 17 and then immediately again on page 19, two of their first and second policy actions are mastery-based credits. In Kentucky, we call them performance-based credits. It's been around, those have been around in Kentucky since the 1900s. I think it was 1998. But to Justin's point,
Wow.
listen, as the oldest person in the room, I can say that. To Justin's point, I've noted it as a barrier, but even though this flexibility exists in policy, the lack of innovation, willingness, entrepreneurialism, courage of school folks to take advantage of that flexibility is glaring. So even when I find more often than not in performance-based credits is that it is used for credit recovery almost solely, as opposed to first-time credit earning. Also to
ma'am.
Justin's
Dr.
point.
Young?
Yes, please, jump in, Nick.
If I could give an example, because I think you're spot on with that. One of the things we did in Owensboro is we created a mastery-based credit for students on the other end of the chart, not just the credit recovery model, but students that were already college
Acceleration.
and career ready going into their senior year, who were floundering around. We basically allowed them to meet their requirements in any way that we allowed them to meet it. We allowed them to use English 101, but we also had students that literally did civic engagement projects, and their credit was met with very innovative models where they were doing presentations, they were doing community engaged activities. So we made it a community laboratory kind of model for students. And so I think that's the challenge with that is when I left and we had new principals and new people come in, that there was a sense that we were doing something wrong with that program. And so they quickly reverted back to your traditional Carnegie unit model. So I think ways that we can make that a little easier and a little more understood might be and maybe even offer some examples of what we mean by that, because I think that's the other piece is people really just don't really know what we mean when we say you can do it that way.
Dr. Breck, I'll add to that. I think it's so important for people to see examples, for us to tell our story. I think that's sometimes we have a lot of great innovative ideas, but just seeing someone else doing something different or doing something differently, then I think that gives the teachers power. It empowers them to do that and to see, okay, I like this idea, but you know what? We can do it this way in our district. So I love the idea of letting people see those examples.
And it was, and some people felt like there was a rigor cliff there, because we were basically telling students that had already met college and career readiness standards that they could basically on their own design their curriculum for their senior year on their own and what they would do. It's subject to approval, but the students came up with very creative alternatives where they essentially created a curriculum that met the things that they needed to meet and were successful. And they were, most importantly, they were engaged in their senior year and actively involved in something rather than just sitting there in an English 4 class that they had already mastered.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
If you don't mind,
No,
I
please.
agree. And your example, Commissioner, is exactly what I thought of, that it was changing up the relevance and the alignment to interest. But I think about communication, and I think about it's great, all the things that we have here. I agree with you, especially when I worked here. Like it's just this wealth of information and support that people don't tap into.
But
But
they
it
don't
makes me
know.
think of, if you don't know how, or you're not sure, if you don't have the courage to do it, or you're not sure what that looks like, or whatever is elevated most is tend to be what you do, especially for public appearance and where you get, judged. But like, I love how they do this to
Yeah,
show
the-
things that are in
The back
progress.
page of the handout.
Yeah, like each one of their,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
each one of the state comparisons, it's not if you got it done and you don't, but it's showing courage of where this is. So with like Nick and his example, he would have had that check mark on there. And then I think really elevating how they did it, because policy is one thing, and you're right, it's been in there since the 1900s. And every time that we have updated that high school graduation requirement reg, like everybody's like, oh yeah, we have that. But who's doing it well, and how do we know, and what does success look like in that? And I think it can look a variety of different ways, but I think elevating those who are doing
love
it,
that.
it's not shaming anybody. It's just saying, hey, this
Yeah.
dot is connected here. And
Yeah.
it also gives, to whomever said it, a circle of professionals who are trying to figure this out, because it's not static. Once you think you have it, figured out, it's time to upgrade and change it up again. And I learned so much from that student panel in Georgetown. It was very good, because you can tell they put effort into the development of their resources, that they are rigorous and meet expectations. So change doesn't mean lower of rigor, it just means different. And I think that's something that the messaging has to really be out there with the trusted sources. And that's not just here, but it's other colleagues and co-ops and all the other folks that really are trusted sources in the state for professional learning and development. Because I think if we don't have something that brings awareness and the how-to, what it could look like, then it's really hard for people to want to take the challenge of changing up status quo, having the risk of failure, or that there's not real clarity on follow-through and sustainability.
Excellent.
So I think those are pieces that we all assume, and because of our turnover rate, it's got to be said 10 times more.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
and
I'll-
the field is super compliant,
Mhm.
and we don't want them out there. We don't want it to be the wild, wild west. But
Right.
it's the difference between folks who are willing to try the flexibility and report back on how it's going, as opposed to those who are like, I don't know if I really want to get outside this box. I'm not sure how far I can go. I don't think it's that they don't care or don't want to try the innovation. I just think they don't know their own boundary spanning. I'm sorry, Dr. Fletcher.
Okay, and not to get too much into the weeds, but to tie that idea in, Dr. Ellis, and also to maybe even to get into the weeds just a little bit, it may be as simple as doing cohorts of teachers that, let's redesign the senior year English. And because when you get together in powerful groups
Yeah.
and they can see that they feel empowered, they also are willing to take risk. But they're also looking at, okay, we can really meet the students' personal needs. But I think teachers work better when they feel like they have support from their colleagues. So again, it may be as simple as doing things like, how do we looking at graduation requirements, how do we redesign, maybe led by KDE or groups or co-ops, how do we redesign the junior, senior year of English?
Absolutely.
And I think that also goes hand in hand with what we do to create the community of learning and, getting the employer feedback, to bring that piece of it into actually what is it that they need, from a communication standpoint for their students, or reading of technical manuals for even dentists and, doctors, as you were mentioning. I think bringing all that together, but I've also was thinking as you were talking earlier, may also be important to identify a pot of money to, stipend teachers to create that new class. I think that also can prod innovation if we're getting in a perfect world and we just got all the money we need.
And I think Dr. Brake hit something that was, we tried many different things back in the days of CARA, performance-based tasks
1900s,
in the
yeah.
1900s. I was one of the students that did a performance, I had a math portfolio. Yes, I had a math portfolio, but having students to help design and actually present, this is what my class should look like, that is student agency, student empowerment. I really like that, Nick. Thank you for sharing that.
Excellent.
Robert, do you have something?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I do agree with Dr. Young. That's a great way to start thinking about how we can be creative with some engaging core content. courses, and I'm a big advocate for student voice. But I will be remiss, and I promise I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but barriers is up there. And I think one of the barriers we have to consider is our state assessment. And going back to what Amanda mentioned about having the courage, I think for building leaders and teachers, having the courage to step outside of that is going to be one of our barriers because they're under the pressure of getting to proficiency and distinguish, getting students to proficiency and distinguish. So, and I see Superintendent Bacon shaking his head. I think he's probably thinking along the same lines. That will be one of the barriers we have to start thinking about. How can we give them the tools? And it kind of skips over to the training, teacher training and certification, how we get the tools to know how to have the appropriate balance to step outside of that and still make sure that they're meeting the needs of our standards in KSA. So we really need to think about that as a group going forward.
Excellent. I think this bleeds over to the funding one a little bit too, but I'm thinking in terms of promising practices, Robert, if we can create these innovation zones that we've toyed with a little bit and maybe some funding to support that, and maybe a safety bubble for innovation, the issues related to implementation dip are very real, but thinking about what that would look like so that we build an innovation environment where folks can take some risk and then prove what I believe we will easily see, and that is that proficient and distinguished performance will absolutely follow when kids have a more engaged, relevant virtual learning experience all along the way. So I don't fear the loss of those scores, but I absolutely understand and respect the folks who do. I'm not a high school principal anymore. Easy for me to say from Frankfurt, but I'd like us to make sure we get to all 5. So let me just do a quick recap, and then I'm going to give the last word on number 1 to Jesse, so you can be thinking about any comments you've been dying to say, Jesse. We've heard barriers are not taking advantage of the flexibility. Teacher prep sometimes prepares them for the field, for a high school experience that they may or may not still be entering. The lack of communication and understanding on the part of the field about the flexibility that we do have. And then this idea that state assessment pressures deter school leadership from thinking about more innovative approaches. Promising practices, Dr. Pate mentioned a regional innovation environment, and then Dr. Fletcher came back to that. What if we had teachers across the GREC region who are working on interdisciplinary English credit-bearing performance-based assessment courses, or whatever models of innovation to support the teacher professional development, which is one of XQ's policy drivers as well. We also talked about accelerated credit, not just performance-based credit. Nick mentioned that for not just credit recovery purposes. I loved Amanda's idea about kind of a heat map of Kentucky where high school promising practices are occurring. And we could almost have our own document where we say here from Pikeville to Paducah, here's some of the stuff that's happening. And then that begins to communicate to the field. The way they want to be communicated to is side by side, not us telling them how they can do either performance-based credentialing or, we also have personalized high school credits. I'm wondering, Glyptis, something that we can think about at the department level. Do we know, in fact, how many school-based councils have approved performance-based credits? How many kids are actually earning performance-based credits in Kentucky versus Carnegie? I don't know if those data are available. How many are taking advantage of the new regulation around personalized credit earning? There's some data pieces there that might serve us well in this idea of what's promising across Kentucky, thinking about this as a model. Amplifying student voice, Robert, thank you so much, as a promising practice. And then, again, this smoothing across regions, I think, is a really smart approach. Jesse, any other thoughts under status quo that you want to throw in there? If not, it's fine.
Yeah, no, I echo a lot of the comments that have been made already. I do think while knowledge of what is available in terms of innovative tools that schools and districts can utilize is certainly a barrier. I don't really feel like that's the only barrier. I think even when schools and districts know about what types of innovations they can do, the logistics of making those happen are still very real. And so anytime that you throw on an opportunity for a specialized course in a particular area, you're adding a prep, and you're increasing the need for additional hands on deck to be able to make those programs and systems work. in a district our size with 3 pretty significant, comprehensive high schools in terms of student enrollment, that becomes very, very challenging with the number of preps we ask our teachers to be able to undergo and the number of students we put in those classrooms. And so if we're going to really, truly unleash these ideas for innovative type pathways and program or classes for particular pathways, we have to think about, we still want students to be able to be mobile and nimble, because a student coming in their freshman year may choose a path that by their junior year, they're no longer interested in. They want to go a different route. So we want to make sure we don't put them behind in whatever graduation requirements would be in place in order for that student to be ready to move on to college, if that's the route that they want to go. And then we got to really take a look at the number of students we're putting in each classroom. 31 is a lot of kids. If you're asking teachers to be innovative, and you're asking them to be personalized opportunities more to what students are particularly going into, doing that with 31 students 6 or 7 times a day is a lot to ask. And I also think that having teachers across regions to offer or multiple schools to offer a course or a pathway, if you will, that's a great idea, but that's also requiring all those schools to be on a similar or same type of schedule. And so I just think, there is some barrier in terms of knowing what innovative ideas and practices are available, but then also making those operational is a real challenge as well in terms of resources that are available.
Well, thank you. I think the don't hurt or break teachers in the process message has been one that you've really kind of consistently shared with us, Jesse, and I think that's really important. I would want to punctuate this notion, though, unless we think differently about the traditional approaches to scheduling teachers, class sizes, and the school day, we're not going to break away from that mental model, right? So how do we think differently about the role of teachers in high school transformation and how that impacts the units that we meet out? If we continue to let large-scale scheduling softwares do that work for us, they're not programmed to be creative. So I think that's part of the challenge, is to recognize that the barrier of traditional scheduling is a big deal.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd written down master calendar was mentioned before when we were discussing.
Time is
if
huge.
learning can happen anywhere, how are we allowing that to be an innovative practice? We're connecting 2 dots. I just starred the policy action 4. We haven't met inside the report here, and then policy action 10 with community-led redesign that builds on our trust factor that we've mentioned, and then the success data. Right? If we have pockets of innovation, how are we sharing that? How are we getting that information out that helps us bring these elements back from not met and partially meets to that check mark that we want to see? And then we're ahead of the game on really more states as we go into the next iteration.
That's a great confluence with the trust conversation. We'll be sure to capture that as well. Thank you. Dr. Ellis.
Yeah, I really appreciate Superintendent Bacon's comments, and I think you have to really look at if it's a barrier, what does success look like?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it may look very different, because I think a full school comprehensive overhaul may not be feasible. It's going to take years, right? It's not a 1-year thing. You got to have buy-in. You have to have leadership vision to know how to balance, because you're moving the cheese, right? You're shaking the Jell-O, so it's shaking everything. And then I think you have to also really look at what have you collectively abandoned, because you can't keep doing all the things and then adding more and more, because there is complete fatigue and burnout. And so, public education gets beat up all the time for not being perfect. We get beat up for little things and big things. And so I think the risk and really what is the intended outcome and the vision for that school and the needs of those students have to be just as personalized holistically in a community as the innovation. So what innovation may look like in Bullitt County may look very different than an innovation in Pike County or Bergen Independent, just depending on the needs and the size and the logistics of it. Not that it can't happen, it's just the approach. And I think everything he said is absolutely right. That when people don't know where you're going and you're making these big flip changes, that's why they die so quickly, because we don't look sustainability and we look for small progress over time. And are we really getting to our outcome that we intended to get to? Or are we lost in the weeds and now we haven't thought through this well? it's hard. If it was easy, more people would do it, right?
Yeah.
And
I think
so
I'll add one other
That
thing
connects
too.
to Dr.
Which is-
Pate's comment about, regional support for that. It's easier for high schools to lock arms and to try that than to think about
Yes.
those heroic high schools out there that live or die by
That's
the
right,
innovation.
that's
of it.
right.
Dr. Fletcher.
And again, we don't want to break teachers. So we have
Not
to
at all.
have teachers have the idea of how do you become a facilitator and shift learning responsibility to the student.
Mm-hmm.
So again, and I have an idea of what that looks like, but still yet putting that into practice is very difficult.
Different.
But
Yeah.
again, as a former AP calculus
You're
teacher,
a high school guy.
I'm a high school guy. I really, my content was, that was why I got into the education, whether or not I could teach, physics along with the AP calculus. I think for especially in all those classes, in order to not break our teachers, we're going to have to help them to be facilitators more and more. And how do we do that?
Yeah, in
And I
my
don't have the
mind-
answer for that.
In my mind, we take the old-fashioned notion of teacher of record, which is a way to get compliance done right, and it's been on the books since the early 1900s, and think differently about teacher of record to that teacher facilitator who has a group of students who have personalized learning plans that she's monitoring, but whoever's teaching those kids is based on what it is they need to learn and know. And so the idea that you're a facilitator of record, not the junior English teacher, is a new concept that I think it's ripe for the picking right now if folks are willing to try that. But
And let
there's
me,
credentialing
John-
issues.
John-
Yeah,
Yes.
let me
Oh.
say, I want to kind of herd us back in here, because we've still got several areas to get
Yes.
through. John's got a comment, and then we'll move on to our next. Remember, we're not trying to solve all the problems necessarily right now. We're going to hand this off at some point, so we won't have to talk about all the, ways, but we got to identify some recommendations to move
Yep.
forward. John?
Well, along that line is, I think we all realize that we've got a lot of school leaders, district leaders across the state who want to be innovative, who want to do things, but don't really know how to do that. So I don't know if creating some type of model framework based on some of the best practices and some of the things that are currently going on in our state would be helpful to provide them. But that was kind of the idea behind the legislation we passed in the last session on schools of innovation, was to do exactly this, to say, here's, maybe have KDE develop a list of Todd might not want to hear this, but a list of the regulations or laws that, perhaps if you wanted to do
A waiver.
this innovation, here's how you could do that, and kind of provide more guidance, I guess, or like I said, a model framework of sorts of how to develop an innovation zone or how to develop an innovative school.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a direct, moving forward directly from a new law as of
And there's
July that
money
we can think
available
about.
there.
And there's a little bit of money there. Yeah, love that. And so I was calling it innovation space, but I think this idea that it's a model framework for that is a really important deliverable. Thank you, and thanks for helping me keep us on time. Second pressing issues bucket is equitable access and funding. Let me be really frank, I think that title is perfectly acceptable, but it's all about funding. I just want to get in a couple of minutes around equitable access. When we think about gatekeeping that happens at high schools, sometimes you can't get into a course because you haven't met the prerequisite. A lot of the conversation nowadays about high school transformation is we should default kids into the most rigorous program, and they should opt out of those as opposed to trying to get into those. So turning that model upside down, that there's some kind of course that you can't get into, you haven't earned your way into it, is a pretty big mental shift at the high school level. But I really do believe it's kind of busts the self-fulfilling prophecy of, we did a lot of work when I was in Fayette around who got access to Algebra 1, Spanish 1, French 1, and orchestra at middle school. We could tell you they were on the track to have the highest GPAs, to be valedictorians, and to have the access to the most rigorous coursework because they got in the right places at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So this idea that equity has to be opened up and that that every kiddo should have access to the most rigorous coursework as the default plan and not as the optional plan is something for us to think about on that side. So on my notes, Glyptosan, I'm going to kind of try to track equitable access issues separate from funding Although on our big buckets, I do think it makes perfect sense that it goes both ways there. So let me open up your conversations. When you look down that pretty long list of equitable access and funding, what thoughts come to mind? Let's just keep this conversation going.
I think quickly IEP and 504 plans and the exponential growth in our high school space.
Yeah, and the numbers are pretty dramatically increasing across Kentucky, especially in the eastern part of the state, so. Got a lot of choices to take a look at there.
I can comment on some of the data that I've been looking at recently. I think coming from CPE, 23% of businesses are engaging high school students during their high school year. And so we have to increase those numbers of businesses engaging those students at that level. How can we engage those employers to come in and have those conversations, help them understand the pathways that they're choosing, and help them really grasp the skills that they need to be building during those freshman, sophomore, junior, and then specifically into that senior year so that they're prepared for where they're stepping out and transitioning into those spaces.
I agree, and I love the fact that they're laid side by side on between the employer gaps and the trust question, because this is about the entire community taking ownership of high-quality high schools in their community that feed the labor market in those communities and ensure that the employees that come out across that stage at high school graduation and post-secondary are ready to fill those gaps at the local level.
I think some of it goes back to what Mr. Ballard was talking about, is having models out there. And I'm not saying everyone obviously can have an Academies of Louisville model, but that's the model we have selected in Jefferson County. But one of the things that we have done is we adopted national standards of practices to close the gap between the models. We have 15 different academy schools,
Yeah.
but those national standards of practice with NCAC has allowed us to, like, these are the standards that we're going to go by. This is going to be the guaranteed experiences that you're going to get from every academy model school in Jefferson County. Are we there yet? No. But we do have some standards that everyone, and a target that everyone is going by.
That's your North Star.
We have our North Star, and we meet about, and it was a labor of love. I mean, we had input from students, teachers, administrators, and district administrators. So it was a labor of love to get there, even just to get to select the standards of practice that we were going to have. But everyone had input, so now everyone is going to hold one another accountable for it. So having a model, whether it's across the state or having some standards of practices, I think it would be very important to really close the equitable gap in opportunities and access for our state.
And like I say, it kind of goes back to what John was saying with playbooks. So, I'm trying to also listen to these comments and filter it into either barrier removal, policy recommendation, best practice sharing. The development of these playbooks may be something that we would ask school council to look at, because every time we get one of these innovations that over the course of 3 to 5 years has been vetted, learned from mistakes, all of those things, oftentimes policies, boards, policymakers, boards, we've already moved on from that. It was great when it was new, but 3 to 5 years down the road, we never go back and revisit that, that's when actually they're just now getting good at it. So that may be something, as we're looking at how to remove barriers and share best practice, the creation of these playbooks by the districts who have been there. And then this relates to many of these areas we're talking about. It could be teacher credentialing, it could be innovative practices, it could be community-based partnerships. But I think there is something to have something to that step-by-step guide almost. You know, and we've got the innovation guide, we've got some things out, but these individual examples,
Well-
I
Are gonna be
agree.
important.
That's why I would love for some research to be done, some external evaluation or something to be looked at, because it is change over time. And it's, you know, we've done a lot around student journey mapping and the experience of the student when things change. So current barriers, when things change, how does that impact the student and the outcome of that? And so I just wonder, because it does take time, right? And we lose
Yeah.
that shine and we go to this thing, and then we lose that shine and we go to this thing, and we're like,
Yep.
wait, this is just now picking up speed.
Or the leader changes.
Right.
It's a new principal who doesn't
Maybe
want to
twice,
do that.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like,
right.
but is it sustainable beyond the personnel? Like, because it's how we do business now. It's how we prioritize this innovation, or it's how we make it our day to day. That's no longer innovative. It's just the way we do business because it's right
Agreed.
for students. And so that's what I wonder about. Like,
And then I think
wonder-
policy and regulation follow.
yes,
Yeah, because that
absolutely.
memorializes
Because then you
it
have your
in
test
law.
case
Yeah,
beyond just a pilot or beyond that initial.
yeah.
But you're going, okay, I got beyond approach. Now we're implementing this. These were the things that caused us angst, right? So I always say, tell me what your journey is, because I don't want to make the same mistakes. I want to make new ones. And so then I learn from everybody else's mistakes and then make different ones. And so to me, that's the piece we always miss in education, because we have to be chasing this constant
Yeah.
need to make sure students are prepared, but we don't really honor the process sometimes.
Yeah.
The onerous process of change.
And we know a lot about
Yeah.
innovation curves and how they unfold and
Process.
points of
Yes.
readiness and all of that.
It just
And-
would be interesting to hear over time, like
Uh-huh.
some of these test cases that,
Yeah.
you know, that Robert shared about, you know, this is what we've been doing and this is the buy-in that's happened. And I know commissioners shared Bullitt County's story many times about how the community appreciates Superintendent Bacon's like commitment to being transparent. How is that going? What went wrong? What
Yeah.
went well? And what impact are they seeing over time? And even if it's incremental, it doesn't have to be this showy transformation, but it really is over time for continuous improvement.
Yeah.
To see how that, I just think that's
Well, and
something
then we
we
tap
never
into
honor.
student voice. That's part of the research. What do kids say about their experiences in
Yeah.
Bullitt County over time?
What's been their experience?
And
And
to
I think
Dr. Pate's
the-
point, this playbook idea is also a perfect example of local accountability in practice. So if we're looking at, I can't remember if we have East Bullitt, West Bullitt, Up Bullitt, I don't know, but if the high schools there are documenting that process by way of their own action research, and then Jesse begins to promote that in the dashboard for local accountability at Bullitt County, you can begin to see how all these threads start to pull in a pretty nice weave. Dr.
I
Pate?
agree.
Well, I think, you know, something also on my mind is access and awareness. You know, and I think that's, you know, I think about our good friend Randy Poe, Dr. Poe. If not for him, I wouldn't know what's going on in his district. You know, there's some really great things going on in his region of
In northern
Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah.
But if I didn't know him, I wouldn't know about those things. And how many people would say the same thing, you know, about Jesse or, you know, any of us? I mean, you know, if they don't know us, they don't know what's going on. How is that access and awareness enhanced by some of this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe this playbook notion, you know, whatever that is? But I think when we talk about the sharing of best practice, the first thing to overcome is awareness.
Yeah, and
So
I think
this I think is relevant conversation.
If we can capture communication, storytelling as a stranded notion across all of these buckets, I think we'll be getting at something a little bit more complex but important.
And I think we'll probably start seeing more of that based on the work of the Cool Council and Dr. Fletcher's advocacy for securing funding for those local accountability measures. The playbook you all have created on how to do that. I think once people become more and more aware, I don't know exactly what the plan is for rolling that out for districts to bite on that and latch onto it, but I believe that's going to start spurring a lot of innovation.
Agreed. Because the context is right. We've created the conditions
Right.
where people can do this. We never take risks because these are high school people's children. So we're not risk-taking, but we're innovating in a very responsible way. And then we begin shining a light on that so that people have, I'm going to use that. I don't want to learn, I want to learn from your mistakes and make my own.
Yeah.
So that's the innovation journey.
I think
That's how it works.
When they start these local community
Town
discussions
halls,
about
yep.
how they're going to develop their local accountability measures, then a lot of innovative ideas will come out of that.
Agreed.
I love what Justin said, just awareness. It's just kind of in the career coaching model that we pursue, career awareness. What's in your backyard?
Yeah.
For the local chambers, like,
Yeah.
how do we promote what's available right where you are in your home? Futurity
Yeah.
helps with a lot of that, the way we're developing
Yeah.
that resource for across the state. Then it's the exploration element, and then it's the preparation, kind of the prime, you prime a pump to
Right.
get it ready. And so that's, I had an acronym that I wanted to share, is this persistence, responsibility, inspiration, motivation, and then the energy.
Prime. There you
Right, you
go.
have to prime it, and then you have to have the energy to get it to move, right? That engine's not gonna start without the gas, without that fuel. So how do we give them the fuel?
Yeah. And don't forget that there's horizontal conversation all the time. I was superintendent in Jessamine. I heard every time there was a new Spanish immersion program over north of 27, because people hear that kids have opportunities, and all of a sudden, my high school's not doing that. What's going on? I'm sure that's a CTE conversation, Dr. Hargis, as well. So,
I'll have one comment. and
okay,
it's-
and then I'm going to toss it to Nick and Jesse, and then we're
Okay.
going to move to number
Just
3.
one quick comment, and Dr. Ellis, you'll probably remember this. I was at a CPE board meeting, and I was talking about vibrant learning across the Commonwealth. Had a very poignant question. Why do I have to come to this board to hear about this? Going back to our ideas of
Yes.
communication,
Yeah.
he's
And
so right.
he's a executive owner of a huge construction company.
Yep.
And asked that question.
That's that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's huge. So I think communication is going to be that elephant in the room for us if we don't take time to actually address that. I did want to mention one thing at the bottom of the funding column, and that is the way we fund high school performance-based credit. That's one of those I think I'm just going to put a star by as we move forward, because what happened in performance-based credits, I understand the historical reasoning for all of that, but high schools are kind of hamstrung. If they go with a performance-based credit, remember, it's all or nothing on attendance, on successful completion. So it doesn't really matter how many times, how much attendance you have, AADA doesn't apply, but you get $0 for a kiddo who's not successful in the course. Lots of things going on there, but that may be one of those policy things that we want to focus in on. And I also, we're going to have to probe more. I don't know what CTE pathways currently get all of the money. There's some things in there I think that we're going to have to dig into a little bit deeper in this next round of feedback as well. And then as well as rushing kids through high school, dual credit, and job market, I am starting to hear more dismay, Nick, about kids coming through with a bunch of high school or dual credit credits under their belt and then still not prepared to be successful at the post-secondary level.
We're working
And
on that,
CPA, I
too.
was going to say CPE has done a lot of research in that regard, more than 10 years old in terms of lost and wasted credit.
And we are in the process of actually working on that with Kia right now.
Okay.
We are going, actually, Dr. Pate probably knows this, but we are working with every public and private institution that participates in dual credit scholarship, in partnership with Kia, of course, and really looking at the transferability of the courses that are being taken.
Okay.
And this is new for private because they don't have to follow the policies
Right.
of CPE, but they are great partners. They really are. But we are looking at the courses that are in the core areas to ensure that they transfer, not just transfer, but transfer to an equivalent gen ed course. Because what's happening is even when they transfer, sometimes they'll transfer to maybe a 300 credit in communications for a communications academic pathway and not a gen ed. So we're really
Right.
working with
As
each
an early
campus. That's
major.
why
Mhm,
we're
mhm.
meeting with each campus and their points of contact to make sure that we are walking through those lists. This is a year for them to make sure the transferability is high. We're making sure it's not just transferring to one or two campuses, but if it hasn't been reviewed yet, to really ensure that those lists, it's not the only thing they can take, but to use the scholarship that it is vetted.
Excellent.
And that's with general education. And then, of course, Dr. Hargis will be a part of the CTE and all the
Yeah.
campuses when we get to CTE.
That's so helpful, and for me, it's not just about transferability, but that's a really pragmatic question. We know from the data that students who take random acts of dual credit are still better prepared for
They are.
post-secondary than those who don't take
And
any at all.
matriculated at a higher level.
And they matriculate at a
Yes.
higher level, significantly higher level.
Yes.
But if we couple that with a really tight, pragmatic approach to transferability, then we
Yes.
save money and time
right.
and all of those kinds of things. So,
That's
Nick,
right.
you may be wondering, if you look at the data, you'll see that we have kind of intentionally not drilled into dual credit or dual enrollment because that's such a huge conversation. We know we will go there soon moving forward. I'll capture that as a big takeaway for us, Glyptis Ann, on the conversation today, that all things dual credit have to become part of this environmental discussion that we're having about the high
Growing
school
so
experience.
fast.
So it's not that we aren't going there, it's just that we frankly just didn't have time to go there. That could have been a task force unto its own. Nick, Jesse, anything you guys would like to add before we shift to trust?
I don't think so. I think the conversation's been right on point.
Excellent.
Well, I think from my perspective, just as a segue into trust, I think, and you know, kind of combining a couple comments from Jesse, from John about the innovation space, the innovation space, and when I went through the stuff that we went through some years back in Owensboro, the District of Innovation program was important. So having that framework, I think, is going to be important. But one of the challenges, and this, I mean, you know, high schools are just such hard institutions to reform because they are so culturally ingrained, they are so community based, and you know, as much as I see and saw the need for options and innovations, you can't force the innovation. And so what we eventually sort of moved to in Owensboro was what I called, and what has been used in some reform areas, the split screen, where we created within the confines of what we could financially do, innovation sectors for students that weren't being well served in high school. We had the Innovation Academy. We had a very active early college academy where we were graduating 40, 60 more kids in, you know, associate degrees and high school diplomas at the same time. And what I found is that as we had that split screen, that innovation model, we could capture the innovation and serve the students that needed it, but at the same time still preserve all the cultural pieces, all the scheduling nightmares, that you know, huge battleship of a comprehensive high school that can't turn on a dime. We could allow that to stay in place, but what they saw from the innovation sector kept pushing them to get better. And the innovation sector kept doing all these new and different things. So we had those two together. And that, I think, was a good place for us with our district. It's not saying it's good for every district, but I think finding ways to preserve the things in that existing institution, but allow space for things to emerge and create new things, and having that playbook, I think, is a really good example of how you can do that. As far as the dual credit space is concerned, I understand and see that. I think what we've had is a major curve there and a frenzy of dual credit, but I have become a little bit alarmed at some of the, just trying to take all these credits, and sometimes I think starting so early in the high school career, in the freshman year, sophomore year, that I think has led to some of the stuff that you're going to have to deal with. So, I think reining that in and figuring out a way to be a little more deliberate in the way those programs are offered and delivered. We really deferred after a while to, and we had the opportunity, not everybody had the opportunity, but we really deferred to giving students the opportunity to go to the college campus and have the experience on the college campus and have an academy set up there, because then you don't have all those transfer problems. Then you have it in the college setting, and it was a powerful setting for those students to experience. I realize not all rural parts of Kentucky have that benefit, but I do think one of the issues with dual credit that goes into teacher certification that is important, we see a lot of teachers come to us that say they want a master's degree and they want to be certified to teach dual credit, but there's no program that allows them to get 18 hours of content. So I do think that EPSB needs to think about how you put together
That's
a
really an
recertification that
accreditation, a
has
Southern
those.
Association accreditation
Yes and
issue.
no. We've been
Okay.
talking to Dr. Pruitt about that.
Okay.
But that really, you're right, Dr.
Okay.
Frank. But
Yeah,
yes,
it's a conundrum for sure. It's one of our
is-
sticky wicket
Yeah.
questions, yeah.
yes.
Well, I've been telling our School of Teacher Education that they have to have room within their advanced masters in education where they allow
For the
professional
content.
content study. Instead of having the 15 hours, just let the students take one more class, just trade a class in pedagogy. But that, you get into the politics of higher
Sure.
ed there, and you get into lots of SAC stuff. So anyway,
Sure.
yeah,
All right,
but
super
I
helpful.
really like the innovation model we're talking about here. I think it's really powerful.
So to wrap on equitable access and funding, I would add that in this kind of future deep dive into dual credit, it's a huge funding issue. John knows this better than anybody at the table, looking at how we divert, KIA funding for dual credit. Will teacher intern apprenticeships be a part of that? Now we have Workforce Pell as an opportunity. I talked with a federal advisor this past week who says he believes Workforce Pell can be used by 16, 17, and 18-year-olds at the dual credit, dual enrollment high school level. So that could be a game changer for us moving forward too. That would be really new
And I would like to
on the
say,
frontier.
aside from just the funding, I think the biggest issue that we've got with dual credit, and I think Nick kind of alluded to this, is there's no coordination. It's a Wild West environment with who's offering what classes, what high schools are seeking what classes. Are we just searching for an amount of dual credit? I think that was the early push, is schools were doing good if they were doing more dual credit, which would lead a student to taking 6 history classes and they only need 2, and is it the right 2? So, I think, again, that's the reason we're not discussing that here, is because there is way too much to discuss. But, dual credit's still a great opportunity. But let me also say, we've got 15 minutes left here together, folks. And we still have a couple of 3 categories to get through, so I'm gonna turn things back to Lou, Dr. Young, so that we can, get on into, some trust.
We're gonna approach trust like speed dating. What do you guys have to say? All right.
Trust me.
Trust me, just trust me.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be fine.
I've heard so far, Chris kind of alluded to this, something we've been thinking about, and that is this proliferation of town halls focused on high school transformation, really encouraging and modeling for and playbooking how the Jesse Bacons of Kentucky can go out and open up the high school experience for feedback from the community. It dovetails perfectly with the work he's already doing around the community and local accountability. And it threads this communication piece and this partnership piece really tightly. So we'll want to capture that as a huge takeaway as well. Robert, were you going to add?
Students.
Students, thank you
Period.
so much.
Yeah, students. They've advised our district on with NTI, nutrition services, KHA legislation. Any adult I bring in front of them want to come back, and not just because they enjoy their company, but that's one thing. But they also come back to learn from students.
You got a heart in my notes,
Yeah.
Robert Moore, but you always get a
No,
heart.
I don't care how many certs, master degrees, and doctors you have. There's always something to learn from our students. So I think that is critical for building trust and for our innovation.
Excellent.
We can't have a relationship without trust,
Yep.
Right.
and a real relationship. And that another acronym, but it has to be relevant, it has to be engaging, it has to be aligned, and there should be some kind of legacy
Yep.
that's left with that relationship.
But I would say the same in the relationship, even beyond just include all stakeholders. But Lou, you had already alluded to this, but
Yes.
the K-16 alignment piece, we have good start on that. But especially when it comes to the dual credit conversation, when it comes to matriculation in whatever it is, to any post-high school decision,
Yeah.
there has to be trust and transparency around informed decision-making around that.
Yeah, thank you
And
so much
so-
for looking at that, Dr. Ellis, because that one, I scratched my head a little bit. Kentucky got a does not yet meet
Yep.
on that one in the XQ work. And
I
then
would
as I read
agree.
what they had to say, I did have to
They're
agree.
not wrong.
But that wouldn't have been my first reaction, because we do see KDE and CPE working so closely
Absolutely.
together, and KCTCS right in the mix, but
I
yeah.
think our
but we can get-
policies and requirements, I think this transformation with high school realigns kind of back to what
it
we did in
catalyzes-
'09.
It catalyzes that,
It does,
right?
and really causes us to look at what we have in there from the past almost 20 years and really update what we have and make sure that it is truly aligned, because things have changed.
Yeah.
significantly in the workforce, in higher education, at all types of training and education, and then even K-12. So I think it's just a good time to,
And I love that that is surfacing under this conversation of trust, because that's going to be critically important.
Yeah.
You know, if we're all out there vying for the same kiddo in dual credit, then, you know, you're pitting the 4 years against the
Right.
Community college
right.
system and all
well,
kinds of
and even with
things
our
that kind
proactive
of-
admissions that, you know,
Right,
HB
right.
307 just passed. And so we'll be rolling with that soon. And so I think about this, and the alignment has to be really there, especially with using GPA, and that we trust K-12.
Yeah,
And those are
Mhm.
reflected, and that also hits in on your transcripts
Agreed.
about how colleges and universities are reviewing that, knowing what's coming to them. So I think there's a whole trust factor and realignment opportunity.
and throwing the private institutions in there that you mentioned
Absolutely,
earlier
yeah.
is
Anytime we
really
say that, we
smart.
mean both.
Really smart.
Because we all partner, so.
Since we're speed dating, I'll throw out my idea for.
I bet you've never said that before in your life.
No, I've never said that. I've never said speed dating, since we're speed dating. Anyway, with that being said, you know, I have a lot of conversations with legislators, and I think that our legislators, for the most part, have our kids at heart. And we may not agree on what that looks like a lot, but it's still, I think, what seems to be the underlying tone or the underlying idea that is this idea of trust
Yeah,
with our legislators. And as a matter of fact, when I read through the measuring durable skills, why states need more than a test,
Yeah.
the closing line on this was so important. It said, and we're talking about, you know, when I say trust, let me talk about it just for a second. When we start looking at local accountability, a lot of times our legislators are saying, can they trust the results? Can they trust what we're putting out? Are the numbers what they should be? And this last sentence, and I'm going to read this because I think it was so profound. The question is no longer whether we can assess these skills. We're talking about our durable skills that we're talking about with our students. The question is whether we can do so in ways that honor the complexity of learning while still meeting the needs of policy, credibility, clarity, and coherence.
love it.
And I think as we spread this idea of local accountability more and more, and we have pockets of excellence already, I think that the credibility, the clarity, and coherence are going to be key with having more policy that pushes, more statute that pushes this as the norm as opposed to the extraordinary.
Bravo, I agree. I agree completely. And I'm not blowing smoke at you, John Ballard, but we will have to just say one more time in this forum that you've been pivotal for us to catalyze the rebuilding of trust and the ability for us to move forward with the General Assembly around big ideas, things that in the past would have scared a body like the House and the Senate to move forward, but really being able, but they have a vision for what high school, high-quality high school should look like. So I think that's critical. That's a great
So I'll
place.
jump in.
Oh, to
Well,
end
no, I was gonna
the
say just
section
real
on
quick,
trust?
because I think, the trust also, in this earlier comments, not to speak for Jesse and Robert, but I think district administrator, superintendent trust that the funding model as it exists will fund innovation. So I think there may be one of the policy recommendations that we may be able to have is that policy supports innovative funding, not status quo funding. And if we don't uncouple some of those funding models, then it will stifle some innovation, because whether it does or not, there may be a trust issue from district level administration that's a big risk to take.
Yeah.
If I want to do something that's going to screw up the district's funding model, then I've got to consider that if I'm a superintendent.
Yeah, the big elephants are state assessment and accountability and funding.
And how that's funded,
clearly.
yeah, how that's tied
And-
to funding.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we can't put our administrators at risk.
All right, now
in
now
the
you can
process
close
either.
the chapter.
Oh, thank you, dear. He means hush and move on. Got it, got it.
I'm hushing. I'm the one hushing. Even people see
The
things.
fourth column, and of course my favorite, is around building a system around vibrant learning. And at the last minute, I asked Glyptis Ann if she could find a slide for us, just as a reminder of the Kentucky United We Learn Council's definition of vibrant learning, which, thanks to Dr. Fletcher and Mr. Ballard, have become part of House Bill 257. It's a beautiful definition. I gaze upon it all the time. I'll just take a minute for you. In March of 2024, this was brought to the State Board of Education, Kentucky United We Learn had put together this idea that vibrant learning entails
Of your
student
bachelor.
agency, real-world experiences, personalized learning, and contextual and interdisciplinary. But just take a minute to read that definition before we jump in. I tell people all the time, I have 4 grandchildren, and I want them to leave school every year more agentic than they found it. I want them to be more curious. I want their tails wagging. I want them to have engaged in authentic and joyful learning opportunities. And I know sometimes, Robert, I'm a high school person too. They're not always super joyful, but that's on us. You know, every kiddo can find joy in the experience of learning because that's how our brains are wired. Our brains are taught to be social, and they're taught to learn, and kids can find joy in that work. I've seen them under that hoodie sometimes, and you think there ain't no joy in there. But that's the challenge as we think about what vibrant learning looks like moving forward. So if you would take a look at that column, you'll see we don't have a lot of recommendations there, but we've had a lot of conversations about this. Amanda mentioned the kind of joyful, authentic, vibrant learning that the kiddos at Elkhorn Crossing talked about, and we left that day saying this is what we want for every kiddo. So I think we have probably a pretty good handle on that, but is there anything you guys would like to surface around vibrant learning, either in terms of barriers, promising practices, or policy? We do have this language in House Bill 257, yay.
Just offer one with virtual reality and those
Oh, yeah.
immersive learning experiences that we've delivered through Everybody Counts this year, over 600 hours of career experiences, and specifically with students with disabilities under the PREETS umbrella, and have really seen engagement and just excitement around what the students can discover in that kind of environment, where they can actually touch and feel things and electrocute yourself in virtual reality, but not actually hurt yourself, right? And to have that experience, and that engages a wonderful reflection exercise after they're done. And even more so when you put a family member in that virtual reality headset and
Yeah.
have them do it alongside their young person.
Yeah, yeah.
And have them competing and completing those tasks really opens up an engaging conversation, which then I think accentuates vibrant learning, right? Because it's going to go home and they're going to
Yeah.
talk about that. And that kind of experience is wonderful to create.
I love it. I worked on a virtual learning grant project at the university with Pickett-Dome Elementary, and the kids' eyes just light up every time they put those on. All I'm thinking about is there lice in those headphones, but that's not what they're thinking about either. I know. So that was really exciting. I think to be a little bit of a Justin Downer on this one, the other side of that coin is also something we're going to have to grapple with. And right now, there's been this huge proliferation of anti-tech engagement in P-12 schools post-COVID. The pendulum is kind of scarily swung the other way. And that's because we never always get it right. We go too far to one way or the other. And high school kids, you come in, you plug them in for the day, they hate it. They absolutely hate it. So coming to grips, I think that's an important notion there, coming to grips with what's the right balance of tech use and tech engagement in schools is going to be, I think it's a frontier issue for us in the next 2 or 3 years. And I don't know if our General Assembly will get engaged in that or not, but I would say to my school partners in the field, get out in front of that. We just saw Simon's Middle in Fleming came out and said, we're going to have a no tech use during the school day policy at our school, which is really kind of really unheard of. And I saw that in social media, and a lot of people were applauding it. And I was like, things must not have been going well.
Well, I can tell you, I've been in just actually within the last couple of days, developing the July Interim Joint Committee on Education
Yeah.
agenda. And as part of that, I've been communicating with a national neuroscientist and some experts in that field that'll be there on that day to
Okay.
testify about ed tech and digital use in schools.
Okay,
And
great.
So it's coming.
Yeah, and have you
Let
been
me
working
ask-
with Marty
so
Park
is there
here
a
at the
recommendation
department?
for best practice or policy that we need to be discussing with this one?
There will be, I'm
'Cause
sure,
I think
emergent.
we're working toward that. John sounds like he's, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Brian Kreisman is coming as well to testify
Okay.
about
what Simons is
yeah.
doing, yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's
And
gonna
I
be a
ask that as we
challenge.
come to 3 minutes left in our
Oh,
time together.
okay, all right, teacher training and certification. I think we've captured some of these ideas here on the column, and then I've added I added for myself CTE certification is a question there too. That's a pretty tight one. Dr. Hargis is in the room. I don't know how much of that is tied to Perkins, how much of that is tied to EPSB, but I think that's one of those I heard on more than one occasion from people in the field, not necessarily those in the room. So that's one of those I want to add to the list. And we talked earlier about this notion of facilitator of record and what that might entail. So anybody want to bring out anything else around the last two columns that got a little bit shortchanged today?
The only last thing I would say is beyond teacher training certification is we cannot ignore our leaders. They have to make this happen, and they have to juggle all of this at all levels. And we know, I mean, research tells us that a principal, a school leader, a district leader can make or break culture and climate and what happens. And so I think we have to keep that in mind of how we equip our leaders to embrace this innovation, because they are the chaos controllers, and
Yeah.
they get blamed for everything. So it's really important that we don't assume they know always what to do,
Yeah,
but we really equip them as well with, I think, with their cohorts of how to really lead and navigate staff. Because, adult learners, we are slow to change
yeah.
and don't always embrace innovation in a positive way. And so I think our leaders, it's always assumed that they know what to do. And
I love
but
that.
while still juggling all the other requirements and responsibilities and integrity. So
And riffing on Justin's idea about regional cohorts of folks, Glyptosan, I think this is the second strand for me besides communication, is leadership development across all the strands.
that law
Because
just passed
high
with-
school, with the new, we do have some around principal, the beginning principal
Yes.
experience. But I'm thinking even more about some of those guys who've been,
That's
have a
right.
big ring of keys in their pocket for decades
A
now.
long
And
time,
are we going to
that's right.
prepare them to lead high
That's right.
schools?
And they're asking for
in-
the
in
same
different
things new
ways.
principals
You know
are,
those
and new
guys.
leaders are asking for. So,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, Jesse.
Can I add? Yes, thank you.
Yes, unless
Just-
Justin cuts you off, jump right in there.
Okay, all right, I'll be really quick. I'm sorry.
Good
As
call,
it relates to
bad call.
technology, I think we got to be really careful about that conversation.
Agreed.
It's going to take technology to innovate. That's going to be a
Agreed,
requirement. And it's
agreed.
not about how much technology students have access to. It's about what we're actually having them do with that
Yes.
technology.
Yeah, are
So
we
that's
going to
gotta be
tell
the
our
center.
surgeon that they can no longer use that
Right.
cyber knife because they're using too much screen time? Right, you know,
Right.
we have to be
right. And
careful.
So there absolutely is a balance. So I hope we track forward very carefully with that conversation moving forward. On the vibrant and innovative learning, I think if we truly want these experiences to be interdisciplinary, which we do, absolutely we do, then I think we have to really look at how we're utilizing and leveraging tools to help us make determinations on whether or not students are mastering different standards in multiple disciplinary measures. And then because we have so much ability now to utilize both quantitative and qualitative data in a truly innovative way. But how are we collecting and storing that data? And that's something we're working on right now in our district in trying to figure out how do we create data lakes where we can dump information in about what students are doing and creating, and how does that tell us or inform us around standards mastery as it relates to those different types of activities.
Yeah,
And so leveraging what we have and then where we're already starting to dip our toes into as it kind of relates to data collection and even utilizing some artificial intelligence to help us disseminate that information once we have it, and then do that in a really innovative way, because I think that even gets to some of the pushing beyond the status quo issues that we talked about earlier in the day too.
I love that. Thank you. I captured that note. And might I just riff on that as I pass it over to Dr. Pate? One of the things that did come up several times in these conversations, it's only captured as one bullet in our notes, but to the importance of modernizing the high school transcript. This speaks to P16 alignment. It speaks to the ability to capture competencies, the qualitative data along with the quantitative that Jesse was just talking about. The transcript as it currently exists dates back to the Committee of 10. It's not even the 1900s, it's the 1800s. So figuring out a new approach to the high school transcript that meets the needs of today's learners and all of the institutions that wrap around them, I think is going to be critical to this conversation moving forward. Dr. Pate.
Justin, can I just jump in
Oh.
really quick?
Well, I first want to
Tell
point
him
out
no.
that she sends it to me real fast with like 2
Bad cop.
minutes left to
Bad
go.
cop.
And
Bad
then
cop.
So that
I'm
now I'm the one who's going to be, I'm fine with
I'm
that.
finished with my part.
I'll take
Go-
the rap.
go for it.
Because I just want to, for the building a system around vibrant learning, I want us going forward, or whoever takes this work on, to really stay true to that title, building a system. And Amanda mentioned it earlier, because it has to outlast the people here, and it has to outlast the people, and that's what a system is for two reasons. One, we'll all be gone, and two, back to building a system. I know this is a high school innovation group, but it has to be K through 12. Because we kill their curiosity after third grade.
Yeah.
That's where engagement
We know.
drops. Put your hands down. I'm the sage on the stage. I'm going to tell you everything you need to learn. Stop asking me questions. We do that, and that's the status quo. We can't not bring back engagement in the 9th grade. It has to be a system, K through 12, of innovation. Thank you.
Well said.
Well said.
And
Pearls of wisdom.
Dr. Moore, just, again, I'm trying to show everybody I did my homework, but this came out one more
what
time.
page?
What page? We're looking on, I think, page 4. It talks about from evidence to meaningful judgments. Equally important is the role of developmental progressions. Evidence only becomes meaningful when it's interpreted against a shared understanding of what growth looks like over time. When we're talking about building systems, what does this look like? I think that, if we just look at this as high school transformation, this is going to be a flash in the pan. It has to have, what does this look like in the 8th grade? What does this look like in the 5th grade? So again, I really love the article because we've said a lot of things here, just keep pointing back to what was in that article as we go through.
And at the high school level, it can't be just that one really, really exciting high school teacher. It's got to be a system.
Yeah.
All right, as we're wrapping up, anyone not named Pate, Young, or Fletcher have any final comments for the group?
He scares me.
We're not leaving. We're going to be a part of this. We've got time. This is the last access we have to you all as a group.
It's been a great experience. I appreciate
Yay,
being invited
Chris.
to the group.
Well, I think the system comment matters.
Yeah.
I think the K-12 comments matter. This group had a specific task, but we wanted to bring, from the system perspective, we wanted to bring a group of individuals from a variety of stakeholder interest groups into this because it is a system. And we're all going to have things that we're going to need to do from here, this point forward. Now, speaking of this point forward, we do have a potential opportunity for some of this work to continue through NASB. And I'm not sure, Gia, if we know any
We've been
additional.
invited to apply.
We have been invited to apply. Okay, so Kentucky will be one of the invitations given to apply for this next round of work. If that work does continue, we think it would make a lot of sense for us now to turn what we have developed and what Lou has worked real hard to capture and Glipta over to our Kentucky United We Learn Council. So what I would like to offer is I would like to ask the work group to entertain a motion to invite the Kentucky United We Learn Council to consider researching and developing these policy recommendations related to high school transformation. Would I have someone who would entertain such a motion?
So moved.
Amanda moves a second. Second, John Ballard. Any discussion on this recommendation?
Let's
Good.
go.
Let's do it.
Love it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, well, we consider that motion moving forward.
We did
Thank you,
it.
ma'am. And listen, just to wrap this up, sincere thank you to you all. Time is the most difficult commodity that we have, and collectively, you all have prioritized this. I, on behalf of Robbie and Lou, Glipta, all of us at the Board of Education, thank you so much for your involvement in this, and we're going to continue to see this work move forward. So thank you all very much, and I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Since we've ran
Moves.
over the meeting time now, I'll move for adjournment.
Well,
Now that
John,
It's gotten so late.
we decided that we were going to
Boys.
wait on you. So technically, we stayed within the
Good
confines of
boy.
this meeting. All right, all in favor say bye.
Bye.
Love y'all. Thank you
Thank
so
you all.
much.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lakeisha. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Jesse.